good vibrations.
Welcome to episode 163, and I've got a previous guest returning to the show today. We were trying to work out when we last chatted. We think it's about 2 years ago. I've been on his show, he's been on mine. We're talking one of the foremost researchers into occult symbology in popular culture and such like. Isaac Weishaupt, the proprietor of Illuminati Watcher. Great site online, illuminatiwatcher.com. Welcome back, brother.
Hey, Mark, it's been a long time. You know, you and I go way back to, gosh, I'm trying to think of when we first linked up. Must have been 2012, 2013, something like that. But yeah, it's been a strange journey these last, few months. It seems like the last 6 months have had more conspiracy action than the 6 years prior. So
yeah, you're not wrong, brother.
Yeah, it's interesting to be. I'm glad we're linking up, man. It's been too long, and like I was sort of alluding to earlier when I was talking to you, I've got a whole lot of guests that I want to get on my show that, I think we all need to sort of share ideas at this point, because this is a major acceleration of the agenda, which is a statement that, I used to roll my eyes at a little bit. I used to think, because I was kind of always on the fence with this conspiracy stuff. I saw some of the symbolism and kind of subscribe to the idea of, okay, yeah, I see this, but most of the truth or stuff I was kind of like skeptical on. But man, it seems these last few months I'm getting deeper down the rabbit hole, and that tinfoil's strapping down tighter than ever before. So I think it's good that we're all linking up still, and I definitely want to keep the momentum going on this great awakening, they say.
Well, exactly. And we were just chatting off air there about how many unexpected people have been showing an interest, certainly in my output these last few months. People that had previously rejected everything that I presented or never shown any interest in it. All of a sudden now, I'm that go-to guy. And they're paying attention to what I've been saying these past few years, because it's all playing out in their own personal lives day by day. You can no longer ignore this. You used to be able to stay outside of it if you chose to, but everyone literally is impacted by what's going on in the world now, these strange times. So it kind of vindicates what guys like you and me have been doing these past few years. Not that there's any great satisfaction in that, because we're still suffering, in the situations we find ourselves in, but at least it's a little bit fulfilling and satisfying to know that we were on the right track all these times, and we're having it proven to us in our daily reality now.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the sort of fringier theories that seemed way too fringy to subscribe to have been clearly showing more possibility to be true, like the Adrenochrome, the pizza talk stuff, which I've always been a like an apologist to the pizza people, because although their theories are a little bizarre for me, I have yet to see the journalists step up to debunk all of the weird coded language that these people are using behind the scenes.
That's right.
Given the recent events with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and I mean, it's so crazy what's going on. And I think all the truthers out there need to sort of like throw their best guess at what's happening, because something's going on that we're not being told the truth about.
That's right, and it feels to me like we're on the cusp of something else happening, something big in terms of revelations of what really goes on in the dark underbelly of society. It really feels like there's something in the atmosphere, something in the air, acting as a kind of portent for something that's still to come. So we've had the COVID narrative, and people are heartily sick of that by now, surely. But I feel there's more around the corner. And that's why I wanted to do this show today, to kind of get ahead of the game and forewarn people of what may be yet to be revealed. So we'll get into some fine detail of that anyway. But first off, how have you been finding this strange period in terms of your productivity and your output? Have you found that it's amplified your efforts, or have you found it really difficult to concentrate and focus on stuff because you've been so distracted, like me?
Yeah, I would say both of those things are true. I have been working on a book about the alien occult agenda for many months, way back to 2019. It actually goes further back, but I didn't really start putting words on the screen until 2019. And And that is such a rabbit hole that I just keep putting it off, and like, oh, let me read a couple more books and let me get this idea figured out in my head. And then 2020 hit and everything shut down for COVID. And I thought, oh, great. Like I'm basically stuck in the house. I'm going to write this alien book. Finally, it's going to happen. And before you know it, I'm going down the rabbit hole of vaccines. And then I had so much research for vaccines that I wrote a sort of mini vaccine book because I was on the fence with the vaccines. I kind of thought, well, they're not super safe, but they're effective and they work. I was kind of, I don't take the flu shot, but I was kind of like, yeah, but like maybe you should get the kids vaccinated. I wasn't really sure, and thanks to some people on my Patreon, we had some good conversation, and I thought, you know what? All right, now's the time. I'm going to really dig into this because COVID clearly is part of the vaccine agenda, and they're going to force this upon us. So I dove down this rabbit hole of vaccines, and I wrote about a 100-page book-ish. It's about 70 pages on the screen for PDF, and I went to publish it through Amazon, and they blocked it. And I've written 7, 8, 9 different titles that I put on Amazon.
Wow. And
never had a problem. And the titles are crazy things like, Illuminati, blood sacrifices, all this crazy stuff that you think would throw up major red flags. Yeah, no problem, right? Ever. Yeah. And I throw a book on there called The Vaccine Conspiracy, and they block it.
Wow.
And then the next day, ironically, Elon Musk, I think it was, he tweeted that his buddy had also written a book about vaccines that Amazon blocked, and Elon Musk threw a fit about it, and I thought that was, ironic. But anyway, to answer your question, the productivity has gone way up. However, my brain is scattered in so many directions trying to follow the news. And, just today, the news is talking about how Trump is retweeting this doctor that believes in shape-shifting reptilians in the government and alien DNA and all this wild stuff. And it's like, there's not enough time in the day to cover everything going on right now.
Yeah. And it's so confusing. There's so much misinfo, disinfo. There's claims, there's counterclaims. Every time somebody comes out with some kind of observation, somebody else comes along to debunk it immediately. So it seems you're getting flip-flopping from the government. I'm hearing it from Trump. I'm hearing it from Boris Johnson. Conflicting messages. You're told one day that you don't have to wear a mask because they're not effective in protecting you from supposed COVID, and then literally the next day masks will be mandated on public transport and in shops and supermarkets, which has been the case in the UK. And one day you're told that you don't need a vaccine, that's not going to be necessary. The next day they start hinting that it is going to become mandatory. So it's just so difficult to find your way around this and just navigate the madness.
Yeah, I've been spending a good amount of time researching something as simple as masks, because and I'm sure the audience is probably tired of hearing of COVID anyway, but we always got to talk it because it's part of the big agenda, I think. But the masks, it's a curious debate going on right now because I'm kind of in the camp of, well, maybe they help and maybe it makes it so I don't have to take this crazy DNA manipulation Bill Gates vaccine. So like I'm willing to give it a shot. But, the truther community is very strongly against anything mask related. And for reasons that I understand. I get it. I get what they're saying. But to me, I'm kind of like in the camp of if we can make it like if I can prevent the spread somehow, but there's studies that go back and forth and then you got this occult ritualistic element of the mask, which goes into Freemasonry. And
so I wanted to ask you about some of the symbolism behind these strange behaviours, these rituals that we're all undergoing now at the behest of these tyrannical governments, because a lot of people have identified, hidden meaning behind these things. So the wearing of the masks is obviously presenting yourself as someone that you're not. It's kind of a changed identity, or you're concealing your true identity in some way. People have, made that observation. Then you've got the social distancing. Nothing social about it, of course. That's an oxymoron. The whole idea is that it's antisocial, but people have said that's symbolic of people being kept apart in society and divided, because united we're strong, divided we're much easier to pick off. So it's a symbolic way of showing that we are all out on our own and there's no unity between us. And then the hand washing, the constant hand washing, where you're coerced into washing your hands for 20 seconds several times a day. That's been observed as being symbolic of washing yourself free of this reality and kind of acknowledging that you're entering into a new one. I mean, you're the guy to ask about this. You can probably frame all that much better than me. Have you noted the symbolic relevance of these rituals?
Yeah, there's this whole sort of... And if you look at the idea of a ritual, you've got this sort of psychodrama. And if you look at... So Anton LaVey, he did a documentary on the Church of Satan back in when they first, kicked off in the 60s. The name of it escapes me. But anyway, he sort of talks about this sort of idea of the ritualistic elements. And the Church of Satan, they claim to be atheists. They don't believe in God, is officially the belief system, which is, I've always found sort of hypocritical and goofy, because they don't believe in gods, yet they practice magic and witchcraft and all this stuff, which, in witchcraft, they believe in, like, the horned god and stuff. But,
so are they Luciferians? Would that be fair to say? Or do they not identify themselves that way?
They don't. They don't. I don't think... And you'd have to ask a member for specifics on it, but they don't necessarily believe in gods, but I think they have a sort of reverence for the archetype of Lucifer, of the rebel angel,
Right.
And, and the reason I bring this up is because in LaVeyan Satanism they have these ritualistic elements in their services where they're wearing the animal heads and they're chanting out the names of demons like Moloch and all this stuff. And they do it, and they say, well, we're not really worshiping gods because we don't believe in that. But they do it in order to set the scene, and it's part of this psychodrama that the occultists understand. And the occultist, when you look at the left-hand path occultists, they believe in the idea of making contact with gods or higher powers. I mean, it depends on which belief system you're looking at. They believe they can make contact with the divine, they would say. And you can do this in many forms and fashions. There's sort of two main camps of this. There's the Apollonian and the Dionysian. And either way, it's about manipulating the initiate's consciousness to either be overwhelmed to the point that the divinity can sort of consume it, or to raise its awareness to achieve the same level of divinity so that they can be sort of, on par with the energy of God. It all sounds very, very strange, right? I'm the first to to say it sounds very strange.
Right.
But anyways, the point is, there's ritualistic elements to get one's mind postured in the sense that they can make contact with the divine. This is through ritualistic drumming or dancing or drugs, or on the Apollonian side, it could be like fasting or abstaining from sex, and all these sort of different ways of sort of manipulating the consciousness to prepare it to incorporate a change, which is kind of what we're talking about with the COVID, the whole thing. It's they're sort of creating a new rhythm of society and new rituals. The hand washing is now a ritual. The wearing of the mask is a ritual. And, like you said, the isolation is something like for instance, they talk a lot about going out in the desert. Manson did it. Jack Parsons did it. Aleister Crowley did it. They all talk about going out to the desert to conduct their rituals. And they do it because it's an isolation factor. It's more of a way of purifying oneself from the regular world. You remove yourself, and you have a new scene, a new setting. And when the real tip off to how we can support this idea that this is in fact some kind of transformative ritual is the fact that right off the bat, they were talking about the new normal and the Great Reset and all these sort of loaded terms. And I remember thinking, why would we need a new normal? It's just some other kind of like, bug, some kind of cold, some kind of virus. We'll deal with it over a course of a year or whatever. Everyone can take their GMO vaccine from from Bill Gates, and then we'll move on with life, But no, you can hear that in their language. They're very clear that things are not going back to normal ever. And they want to plant that seed. They want you to understand that this is preparing everyone to be remolded into this new society, which they're already showing all the sort of tells of surveillance and they like here in America they're passing these bills where they're trying to strip away rights basically. But yeah, the mask and the hand washing and the isolation and the social distancing, it's all to pave the way for the new world order and the new way, which again, like I said earlier, like I'm on this, I always sort of lean on the fence of like, are the truther people being paranoid or is this for real? And I can't argue with the truther community on this. It seems very much that they're causing massive amounts of chaos, which is what they told us they would do in 2016 when Donald Trump was being called the chaos candidate by everybody and anybody. And here's the chaos, and now they want to produce the order, which is going to be, however they want to frame this. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're going to basically instill some sense of order, which means our rights get trampled on, is what it means.
I was on a show last week with Robert Phoenix, the Friday Farcast, and we got into talking about how music has been used as a tool of manipulation, the corporate music industry, for social engineering and mind control and all this. And we were speculating on whether the controllers might actually be done with all of that now, because they've basically trashed everything that they built up with the corporate music industry. There have been no live shows this year, so there's been no opportunity to get all that occult symbolism into the subliminal minds of the general public, which they normally love to do. There have been no music videos made because there's just no product coming out. There have been no Hollywood movies made. There are no new TV shows being commissioned. So what if they're done with entertainment as a vehicle for occult subliminal control, and they're just concentrating on new methods to subvert and influence us now? That's quite a chilling thought, that maybe entertainment as a vehicle is finished, and they feel they've taken it as far as they need to.
Interesting. That's an interesting thought, and you're right with all those statements. The idea here that they might have moved on, maybe there's been too much truth in going on that now they feel like their plan has been foiled or something. Maybe, I don't know. I mean,
they're cancelling sports games and these big events like the Grammys and the Super Bowl. I don't know if they're going to be coming back. And these big concerts, these big stadium arena gigs that rock stars used to do, none of that is happening. And that's a real surprise to me, because when everything went into lockdown in March, I was saying to people, this won't be for long. They've invested so much in entertainment and popular culture as a mind control vehicle, they're not going to want to trash all that. But we're a few months down the line and they're looking like they are willing to trash it all.
It's very bizarre what happened. And right off the bat, if we rewind back to pre-COVID days, remember all those CEOs were stepping down all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And then they immediately were shutting down all the businesses. And I thought, well, what is happening here? Like that, the Illuminati, if we want to call them that, the Illuminati, if they're clearly like have corporations and businesses and make money off the economy, like why would they take such a hit? And if you look at the Freemasonic idea of the great work, the only way to reach the top of that pyramid scheme of the Freemasonry is to contribute something to the great work, which leads us into the idea of the New World Order and the new society they want to bring about. You go all the way back to Francis Bacon with the New Atlantis and all this stuff. And that would be the explanation for why they did it, because like so many people say, like, hey, we didn't shut down every business because of the million other. You had the West Nile virus, you had the H1N1 swine flu. I mean, the list goes on and on. We didn't shut down for any of that stuff.
Right. Well, none of this is about a virus. We know this. it's all about ulterior motives being brought in. And I want to get on to adrenochrome in this episode. Very dark and devastating subject, but just to stay on COVID for a minute, there's so much evidence to show that this coronavirus stunt was planned long ago and was known to be coming. The public were the last to know, as we always are. And I'm doing a presentation next week, a live talk at Truth Juice in Birmingham, and I'm putting together a slideshow for it with some examples of coronavirus predictive programming, or what appears to be. So it's movies, TV shows, all the usual, that appeared to show some foreknowledge of this whole narrative and the way it was going to play out. And also there's documentation that's available that's come forward as well, such as a document from the Rockefeller Foundation from 2010, 10 years ago, Lockstep, where they're talking about responding to a pandemic of this exact nature. But I wondered if you've uncovered any examples yourself of apparent pre-knowledge, foreknowledge of this whole COVID thing in the years and months leading up to it.
Oh yeah, most definitely. That document, I read through that document where they talked about the lockstep. There was, and it was on my podcast. I think it was like COVID Conspiracies 4 or COVID Conspiracies 7. I don't remember. But I went through that whole document, and what they were doing was saying, hey, there's a scenario. We need to sort of see what happens if these certain events were to happen, and what the reaction would look like. And there was like 4 reactions, and one of them was lockstep, which is basically spells out almost everything that they've done. And lockstep, they sort of, if I remember correctly, it didn't end well for the population because it was like sort of too authoritarian or something like that. But the movie Contagion, that was showing us, and I did a show on Contagion as well recently. And the movie Contagion showed us pretty much every single thing that happened, except for the looting and the rioting. But then we had the whole Black Lives Matter thing happen, and then there you go. There's the looting and the rioting. The other thing that was sort of it wasn't entertainment related, but the UN roadmap to some kind of, I can't remember the name of it. There's a UN roadmap you can find that basically spelled out what they could do in the future to handle viruses, and it talked about how vaccine hesitancy was a big problem and how they need to sort of find a way to get around that. And you're seeing all these narratives of people talking about how this is going to be a real problem, that people don't want to take the vaccine, which I think, in my opinion, they're going to ultimately go down that path of forcing us to have the vaccine, which is what you saw in Contagion, where you're not allowed to go into a store without the identification proving you have it, which, oh, by the way, Bill Gates was paying, I think it was Harvard, to study the ID 2020, which basically puts like an invisible tattoo on your body that they can scan with a smartphone to see that you've got the vaccine,
right.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm with you on this, and I go back and forth on the COVID thing, because like I know people in the medical industry, and it seems like, I don't know if I buy the idea that like Dr. Kaufman says, like, it's not even a real thing, it's totally fake. I don't know if I buy that. I don't go that far, but I do think that this could very well have been manufactured. I do think that they are definitely using it to their advantage to push an agenda that they've always wanted to push, and that's where things are real concerning.
It's clearly not something that just randomly mutated out of China and nobody knew it was coming. I mean, you've got Bill Gates's Event 201 situation, which occurred in October 2019 with the World Economic Forum, the Johns Hopkins University, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they were speculating on an event of this exact nature. And that was only 2 months before it's said to have broken out of China. So they knew it was coming. Yeah, I know what you mean. We can't be sure whether it's a genuine virus, or even if a virus is what we've been told it is, and if people are really dying of something or not, or whether it's just a particularly bad strain of the flu. But whatever the case, this whole thing has been hijacked and jumped upon as a golden opportunity to introduce all kinds of alternative measures that have been on the wish list of the New World Order for a very long time. And all these examples of the predictive programming in the popular culture, show that this was known to be coming. Have you seen those clips from an episode of The Dead Zone, a Stephen King story? It was a TV adaptation in the mid-2000s.
Yeah, someone sent those to me.
I mean, that's crazy, because in one of these episodes...
Examples. Yeah, there was another show on Netflix. I don't remember the name of the show. I never really watched, but they talk about coronaviruses and all this stuff. Yeah, it was definitely in there. And this is what drives me crazy, is they knew, I mean, like, you know, viruses exist, and they know that they needed to plan for a virus outbreak, and there's just countless studies, there's movies, there's TV shows talking about it, and they want us to believe that not once did they consider, okay, a virus breaks out and it's a real bad problem, it's a pandemic. What should they do? Should they wear, bandanas and masks? Like, what can people do to help out? They didn't think to look at this. I mean, like, come on, give me a break. They've been doing studies on virus outbreaks for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, channeled God knows how many millions of dollars into this, and they didn't take the time to be like, let's see if masks help. Let's see if a basic handkerchief that everybody has in their house would help mitigate the spread. And it's all to make the chaos and the fear. They're spiking the fear, which all of this is very relevant to the adrenochrome argument, because they're juicing the environment with tons of fear, and on top of that, you see the obvious elitist attitudes that they have about this whole thing. Like, they don't, like, people think, oh, they would never do these things, and they would never, kill kids and stuff. And it's like, I don't know if you know who these people are. They're absolute psychopaths. When you have so much money in the bank that you'll never spend it, your kids will never go through all the money, and you still can insist on, funneling more of the money your way when you've got people starving and unemployed and getting kicked out of their homes with their kids. Like, if you don't think that they would take it that far, like, you're pretty naive, I think. Because I'm a borderline granola social justice warrior kind of guy, and that's always been my shtick, is like, these elitists, these Illuminati types, like, they don't care about people. They really don't. Like, whatever, it's always the means satisfy the ends. And to sum up a whole lot of research, I think the ends are they want to become God, and they worship Lucifer to be the archetype that can get them there. So yes, whether we're talking COVID that they may have manufactured and decided they're going to let it loose and kill everybody, or if we're talking about adrenochrome and, killing kids to feel younger, or whatever it is they do with this stuff, I think it's all very possible.
Sure. Another movie that appears to play into the current narrative was V for Vendetta from the Wachowskis from 2005. And I've got a meme that somebody's knocked up here about that whole film. And it mentions that it's about a totalitarian dictatorship that gains its power by creating a society of fear due to an alleged virus spreading throughout the world. In the film, the media pushes fear-based propaganda on the television screen of every household and on the city streets. Sound familiar? The authoritarian dictator promises security but not freedom. The constant theme of "this is for your safety" is repeated throughout the film. Most importantly, the film ends with society waking up and the corrupt fascist regime is dismantled. What year is the film set? 2020. Now that's the kind of outcome I could live with.
Absolutely. And, Alan Moore was the guy that created that story, and he's a ceremonial magician doing occult rituals and all that stuff, and he's a big. He did The Watchmen, right? Yeah, he did The Watchmen and all that stuff. Yeah, so he's very much in the know about what's going on. And in that movie, they had, they were also tearing down statues. They had curfews implemented. Yeah, and all these things. All these things that we're experiencing.
That's right. There's no shortage of these examples when you go looking for them. So just to move on to the adrenochrome agenda then, and this is obviously very dark subject matter to get into, but if it's real, and there's lots of evidence to suggest that it is real and it does go on, then the very least that we can do is talk about it and give it some consideration. If these children really are suffering in the horrific ways that we hear about, then, not talking about it is not any kind of solution. So we need to be doing shows like this. And I really feel that some revelations about this are very close to breaking the surface, and so I wanted to get ahead of the curve by putting this show out. And looking at all this stuff recently has kind of made me realise that I didn't go far enough in the things that I wrote about in Musical Truth Volume 1. I mean, I covered MK Ultra mind control, and I covered monarch programming and how they mind control children from a very young age and, shatter their consciousness. I covered satanic ritual abuse. I covered the idea of blood sacrifices for fame and fortune, and I know you did in one of your books as well. And I've even covered the idea of demonic possession of celebrities. But even with all that stuff aside, I didn't get into the extremely dark subject area of adrenochrome extraction. The idea that children are kept captive in these underground bases, underground tunnels, by these sick, diseased, freak elite types that want to harvest their adrenochrome, which is a chemical secreted in the human body through the adrenal glands and connected to the pituitary and pineal glands, and it is produced at times of immense trauma when the child is on the brink of death, and the body produces this material literally to try and keep the person alive in a life or death type situation like that. And what we hear about is that there's an industry that is worldwide, and it's been going on a very long time, where they harvest this adrenochrome and pass it around at huge costs. It's said to be highly addictive, one of the most addictive substances known to man, more so than heroin. And the people that take it believe that it's kind of a fountain of youth. It gives them, it prevents them from aging, and it restores their, bodily well-being and all of this. It's very, very sick. So this is what we hear about. And things that make me wonder whether it's close to breaking the surface include, we've had some documentaries recently. There's the whole Pizzagate Pedogate documentary, which came out recently, recapping on the story from 2016 of Pizzagate, which I did some shows on that around the time. We also had Out of Shadows, which kind of went viral, excuse the pun. A lot of people got to see that movie. You got the whole Q narrative, whatever stock anyone may place in that. Part of what we hear about the Q Anon movement involves the rescue of children from these underground tunnels and the bringing to justice of those responsible. But even more important than that, there has actually been coverage on mainstream TV in Europe of the adrenochrome agenda. There was a Turkish news report that went out on the mainstream, which I featured in some of my posts a few weeks ago, where the host is actually talking about adrenochrome, and he's got some pictures of celebrities and politicians on the wall, and he's accusing them of indulging in this stuff. He mentions Johnny Depp, Oprah Winfrey's name always comes up, Ellen DeGeneres, Tom Hanks, many other names, royalty, Prince Philip, politicians, George Bush, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Podesta. Naturally, this story was not picked up on by UK mainstream media, but a couple of other countries did cover it. It went out in Bulgaria, it went out in Greece. And so all of this makes me think that we might be on the cusp of some major revelations here. Any thoughts on that, first off?
Yes, I have lots of thoughts. Okay, so Tom Hanks, right? There was a lot of the Q crowd, which I'm not a part of, but jury's out still, in my opinion, as to whether this Q thing is accurate or not.
Yeah,
but
pretty much with me as well. You keeping an eye on it, though, right?
Yeah, a little bit, casually. And I'm going to tell you one thing. I listened to and I don't know if this is a podcast that's representative of the entire Q community, but there was a podcast because I was doing a little research on adrenochrome for this show, and there was a podcast, I believe it was something to the effect of Q Anonymous or something like that was the title of the show, and they're talking about adrenochrome, and they mentioned David Icke's research, right? And they pronounced his name David Icke, and I thought, well, that's very odd. I've never heard anyone pronounce it wrong, and to me, I feel like that embodies the overall sort of idea that I've always had about the Q movement. It's just a bunch of alt-right people trying to hijack and co-opt the truther community to, make people support their guy. Is kind of what I think. I think it's a political sort of thing.
Could be.
But anyway, yeah. So the Q people, they say that Tom Hanks is, addicted to the adrenochrome, and he's actually like arrested somewhere, and that's why he was one of the first people to have COVID. And there was a very strange thing going on when COVID first kicked off of all these celebrities having COVID. But anyway, he recently, now he's a citizen of Greece, which I found very odd. And I thought, man, maybe these Q people are right on some levels. Maybe these people are arrested somewhere and they're keeping them out of the limelight. But then Ellen DeGeneres also gets a lot of these claims of being involved with all this stuff. And now today, I saw that she is her show is being investigated for abusive, claims of people on her staff. So it's all very curious what's going on with the celebrity side of the house. But me, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say something is going on. Have you seen pictures of these celebrities and politicians allegedly with ankle bracelets on, of the type you get when you're under house arrest?
Yeah, I have. And that's very strange. And then all these politicians and stuff when they got like black eyes, like they've been in a fist fight,
Yeah. That's supposed to be an after effect of the consumption of adrenochrome. The giveaway is the black eyes.
And I don't know of a better explanation. It's very strange stuff going on, very strange symbolism. And to me, I think that, and I can go real crazy if you want to get real crazy. I think that to understand why these people do what they do is to understand Aleister Crowley, because, Crowley, he was this, he's a sexist, animal torturing rapist, and he's devil worshiper and abuses women and a complete sociopath. And he himself advocated for killing children. And he talked about it in the Book of the Law and Magic and Theory and Practice. He talked about how to create the Gnostic Mass Eucharist, it required the blood of a newborn. And he talked about how the blood of a baby is the purest, which, and we can get into this, but historically, this is a theme that you find. This isn't a new or bizarre sort of idea. This is something that they've been doing for hundreds of years. And I would argue that the elites are, in support of this idea. If you look at Liber 77, a Crowley book, he says things like there's no God but man, and he says things like the slaves shall serve. And that's the attitude of these elites. They don't care that they're and it sounds really crazy to say it, but like they don't care if a baby gets killed if it makes them feel better. They're complete off the rocker, insane people. And in Magic and Theory and Practice, Crowley said the whole planet must be bathed in blood. Before man is ready to accept the law of Thelema, the great war must be fought. And I don't think there's any length they wouldn't go to. And I think, this ties into the ancient, Babylonian religions and worshiping Moloch and sacrificing babies to Moloch, all that stuff. This is something that's like an esoteric occult doctrine that is no longer popular. It's only traded sort of on the underground and for those in the know. It's something that happens when you reach a certain level of elitist, I believe.
Well, for anyone that believes they wouldn't do that kind of thing, they wouldn't torture and kill kids in that way, just think about foreign wars of occupation, which are going on pretty much all the time, and politicians order drone bombs to be dropped on cities in the middle of the night, and they don't know where they're going to land, and there's always civilian casualties, and some of them are going to be kids and babies, and they think nothing of that. They sleep soundly at night, seemingly, after giving that kind of order. So, we can know from that we're dealing with psychopaths who don't think the same way as you and I and people listening to this. They have different value systems, and we have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. It's you always hear that sort of cliche that like most people don't want war, and it's true. Like people don't get want to go into war. They get persuaded to go into war through the big machine,
Right.
six companies control 90% of the media we consume, and to think that the heads of those six companies aren't in the same room trading ideas and theories to bounce off each other of ways they can consolidate wealth and power, it's pretty naive if you ask me.
Yeah. So I'm pretty late to the party when it comes to this adrenochrome research, because I kind of got turned on to the whole subject area via the Q narrative. I was keeping a close eye on what that was all about and the claims that were being made there. And as I mentioned earlier, the idea that these children are being rescued from these underground bases and stuff, and they had been getting kept there to harvest their adrenochrome, is a big part of that story. We're still waiting for verifiable evidence that this has been taking place. It's still kind of hushes and whispers at the moment, but I guess soon enough we'll know either way. So that's what got me into this whole thing, and I've come to realise that it's been around forever. I think David Icke wrote about it in his books many, many years ago, but when you start looking at the symbolism in movies and TV shows, you find yourself going further and further back, years and decades, and you realise that this adrenochrome thing has been around forever. So I've kind of trained myself to recognise all the symbology pertaining to trauma-based mind control, satanic ritual abuse, secret societies and mystery schools and all this. And I think I'm pretty good at picking those things out of movies and stuff now. And also, when you get food-related code words which are associated with Pizzagate, references to pizza and chicken and pasta and all this. But there's also a load of symbology related to adrenochrome, and I've been getting myself up on all this. So references to rabbits seems to be a big one, and particularly white rabbits. And you've got the phrase "follow the white rabbit," which is cropping up a lot in Q-type research. Then references to fish, and particularly fried fish. And interestingly, during the lockdown period, Madonna put out a very bizarre video where she's singing into a hairbrush and she's saying we need some fried fish, and she's acting all kind of erratic and crazy, like she's losing her mind. And that's been identified by people as her calling out for adrenochrome. She's suffering withdrawal symptoms cold turkey because she's reliant on the consumption of this stuff, which is what we hear about so many of these celebrities. Then you also get a sort of pentagonal shape, which denotes the chemical makeup of adrenochrome. When you look at it under a microscope, it's supposed to be these pentagonal type arrangements. And you see quite a lot of these in old films. And one in particular that stands out for me is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, where you've got that very interesting pattern on the carpet. You know, when Danny, the kid, is going around the hotel on his little trike, and he's going over these patterns on the carpet. Well, turns out that the pattern on the carpet there looks virtually identical to how adrenochrome is said to under a microscope, and that movie was 1980. So it seems like so many other things, we've had symbolic references to adrenochrome shoved right under our faces for decades, but most people have had no idea what to look for.
Interesting, yeah, and I've heard that adrenochrome, molecular structure there on the is a sideways white rabbit as well, tied into that. And
yeah, that's where the rabbit comes from, yeah.
Yeah, and then the, talking about the white rabbit, that's Alice in Wonderland, which is a tale about changing the perspective of a person, initiating someone, basically. And Alice follows the white rabbit down the rabbit hole, and that's where we get all these terms from. And
Lewis Carroll was a pedophile.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, indeed. And there's a the list of movies goes on and on about them talking about adrenochrome, and I do want to quickly talk about, since you brought it up, since you talked about The Shining, the sequel Doctor Sleep. I read the book and did a show on the book. It wasn't until later that I watched the movie, which was recently. And there's some occult elements in the story that we could consider. For instance, the cat that is in the nursing home with Danny, because Danny is sort of, a caretaker in this nursing home. This cat knows when people are dying, and the cat's name is Azazel, which is the name of a fallen demon, the demon that specifically introduces the forbidden knowledge to humans, which is very Promethean or Luciferian. Prometheus, of course, being the tale of stealing the fire from the gods to give to the humans, which is the Luciferian doctrine of, the serpent's here to help us and God's the oppressive one. Now, what's curious and how we could tie Dr. Sleep into The Shining. In The Shining, if you recall, Jack is at the Overlook while he's waiting for the manager, Stuart Ullman, there to sort of give him the tour, and he's reading an issue of Playgirl magazine, which most people are familiar with that are in this sort of conspiracy world. And on that cover of that particular issue of Playgirl, it has an article about incest in the family. Obviously, in the movie, there's allegations that Danny gets sexually abused by his own father, Jack, in the movie, which is supported by different theories and such. Well, in Dr. Sleep, the movie, and this isn't in the book because when I read the book, I didn't see this, but in the movie, Danny, he's sitting at his desk at the nursing home, and he's thumbing through that same exact issue of Playgirl, the same exact one. I've got the pictures on my Instagram at Isaac Weishaupt, and you can see that it's the same exact issue. Now, this is, again, talking about sort of sexual impropriety here, right? And if you look at the rest of the story, basically the story of Dr. Sleep, it continues the story of The Shining, where sexual abuse by a handler has the ability to unlock powers of the mind, fractures of the mind, what they would call the cities. It's sort of superpowers of The Shining, right? This ESP thing that they've got going on. And in the story Dr. Sleep, Snakebite Andy, one of the characters, she's sexually abused by her own father. She goes around killing pedos. Dick Halloran, who was, in The Shining, he was abused by his grandfather sexually, and this guy also gives this grandfather that sexually abused Dick Halloran, he gave away the fortune that he had made to an orphanage. And in the book, Dick Halloran says he thinks he knows why, implying that this is where his grandfather went and would abuse children, which is very much like Penn State's Sandusky. He had his whole charity and the Franklin abuse scandal. And there's all these ideas that these charities are ways that they traumatize and abuse kids, which, oh, by the way, Charles Manson was also in Boys Town in Nebraska, where a lot of this Franklin case stuff from the 80s kicked off of, high-profile politicians and elitists taking orphan kids and abusing them. And then finally, the story, Danny, he's got this dissociative identity disorder thing where he's talking to Tony. That's the name of his imaginary friend who and Rob Ager did a tremendous analysis on this, but like Tony, he says in the film, he's like, Tony, it lives in my mouth and then he lives in my stomach, which, I mean, it's pretty gross, but like,
I know where you're going with this.
Right. And, now that's a whole thing, right? You got this whole major subplot of The Shining and Dr. Sleep talking about the abuse of children, right? But then in Dr. Sleep, we get introduced to the idea of steam, and steam is the adrenochrome, right? And what it is you've got these vampires, they call themselves the True Knot, and they are able to keep their youth by inhaling the steam of abused children, which I argue is clearly an analogy for adrenochrome. And there's examples about it in the book. There's a horrific murder of a kid that plays baseball. His name's Brad. And in the film version, it's pretty gruesome, but in the book, it really wasn't that bad to read. It didn't strike me as that gruesome of a scene. But basically, they tortured this kid with a knife to get more steam out of him. And that, supports all these ideas of the adrenochrome, which the story has a guy named Crow Daddy, which is, I would argue, Aleister Crowley reference. And in the book, Abra, which is one of the main characters, she's talking about these vampires and the True Knot, and she touches the Brad, the baseball boy, she touches his baseball glove, and she tells Danny, these guys are not like us. They used to be real people, but now they have these lizard thoughts. Okay. And you're familiar with the work of David Icke. He's the one that started talking about shape-shifting reptiles and lizard people that feast on the fear and the blood of children or whatever. I mean, and the list goes on and on. Like the whole story. And then I've done spin-offs on my podcast about Stanley Kubrick's his movies, Clockwork Orange and Lolita. They're talking about all this sort of stuff. In Clockwork Orange, they're drinking milk at the Moloko bar, which I argue is Moloko bar. I mean, I know that's like the word for milk, but it's uncanny that Moloch appears in the title there, which was the god they sacrificed children to. But anyways, they drink this milk laced with adrenochrome. I mean, what do they think this is? You know what I mean? Like, and then Lolita. There's this, we talk about the Wayfarer thing. I did an episode on Wayfarer, and in Lolita, there's a scene at the beginning where basically the handler, played by Peter Sellers, the handler is talking about how he can arrange for this guy to use people as furniture, and I can set you up so you can watch executions. And he's implying that he's tied into this underground abuse because later in the movie he's talking about hooking him up with like another little girl and stuff. And but yeah, anyways, you brought up Kubrick and The Shining and the adrenochrome, and that's just yet another example of how Kubrick seemed to show us there's a shady side to Hollywood, and that's why he left America and never went back.
In many of his movies, including Eyes Wide Shut, his final one.
Absolutely.
And just going back to the Peter Sellers scene at the very start of Lolita, where James Mason hunts him down because he wants to kill him because he's stolen Lolita away from him. They're both basically paedophiles. Peter Sellers is playing ping pong, and he invites James Mason to join him in a game of ping pong. And that is a phrase which cropped up in the Pizzagate narrative of 2016, centered around this pizzeria in Washington, D.C. called Comet Ping Pong, which was accused of having an underground base where children were kept captive and sexually abused. So that's kind of interesting. And, Lolita, almost 60 years old, just makes you realize this stuff has been going on forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's you're talking about playing Roman ping pong, which it's just so bizarre. And then on top of that, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we may be doing a project here. I don't want to give away all of his juicy bits, but Peter Sellers' daughter, Victoria Sellers, she was essentially the handler, the Ghislaine Maxwell to Heidi Fleiss. So there's lots of weird connections here I mean, it's like this secret little, and you talked earlier about this sort of idea that there's going to be a revelation of things, and COVID is paving the way for it. I would argue that,
or COVID is acting as a smokescreen for it, and diverting attention away from it.
Yeah, because that's all people talk about is the COVID thing.
Right. I've been more interested in what people aren't talking about these last few weeks. I've brushed COVID to the side and started looking in other areas, and I'm like, okay, well, everyone's obsessing over dying from this beastly virus. What else is happening out there that they don't want us looking at? That's why I feel these revelations might be very close now.
Yeah, that's always the tell, isn't it? When there's something major going on, it's like, what are they covering up? And it's kind of like here in America around Christmas, they always push some kind of legislation through while everyone's out of town and hanging out with their family, not watching the news. They'll push some major infringement on our rights through,
Right.
But what I was going to say is, I've been writing this alien book. I've really been pushing it the last few weeks. I've been going hardcore in it, and you talked about Podesta earlier, who's obviously linked into the Pizza Talk stuff. And Podesta is not only linked into Pizza Talk, he's linked into Tom DeLonge, the Freemason from Blink-182, and his ATIP program, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, that's telling everybody here about how we're going to reveal this great truth about we've got these exotic materials from another world. Basically, it's UFO disclosure happening, and they've been slowly rolling it out. They said, we've got these videos of UFOs, and that's exactly what they are. And then Commander David Fravers plugged into this this group of folks from To the Stars Academy and ATIP and all that stuff, which maybe I misspoke. Tom DeLonge runs To the Stars Academy, and ATIP was the government-run program to research all this stuff. But anyway, and all these folks are sort of in bed together, I'd argue. But Podesta's part of this whole thing, and Podesta, and this is a fringy idea, and I'm still working on trying to like sort of confirm some of this stuff to sort of make a coherent argument. But I would argue that on some levels, these elitists might be doing exactly what David Icke said. They might be sacrificing humans and releasing the blood with its essence back to the alien gods, these demons or whatever they are. And that might be the link between Podesta's interest in the pizza stuff and Podesta's interest in the UFO disclosure thing. It could be that both worlds collide in 2020.
Well, everything else is connected. Pizzagate connects into the whole spirit cooking thing. Marina Abramovich, all these celebrities that would attend these spirit cooking dinners where they do mock cannibalism, supposedly, although cannibalism appears to be a real thing. There is actually a restaurant in LA called the Cannibal Club where on their website they openly speak of serving human flesh, and they name Katy Perry as being among their patrons, their celebrities that come along there.
Really?
And they're very open about it. And then the spirit cooking thing ties directly into Adrenochrome, and you probably find it ties back into Jimmy Savile and all these celebrity pedophiles and all this. It's all ultimately connected. And I think we've been given the opportunity to know forever through these movies, through the concept of predictive programming and placing the truth in plain sight. There's a great compilation of Adrenochrome references in movies. I'll post the link to it in the show notes below, but it's on YouTube. It's just short of an hour, I think, and it just brings together all these scenes from different movies. There's this one, Hocus Pocus, with Bette Midler, which seems very blatant in terms of what they're talking about, kidnapping kids and, taking in their essence. There's Death Becomes Her with Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep, who are obsessed with preserving their youth and staying youthful forever. Bruce Willis is in that one as well. Then there's Monsters, Inc., and that one is all about, the monsters of the title prey on the fear of children. So they frighten them and terrify them, and their fear serves as sustenance to them. And that appears to be a euphemism for adrenochrome, given what we now know about it.
Yeah, and you could add. I'd like to see that because I haven't seen those video clips of Death Becomes Her and Hocus Pocus, but I could add another one to the mix there in the same vein. A movie called Stardust from 2007, and it's got basically some witches. It's the triple goddess. They got these three witch sisters, and they need to eat this woman's heart to sort of get their youth back and to power up. So this is an old tale, this idea of like vampire sort of attitudes towards things, and I'd argue that there's a camp of folks that do take it that far. Aleister Crowley, I've got a quote here from his book Magic in Theory and Practice, which he reveals that the demon that was whispering into his ear for Book of the Law, the sort of foundation for his religion of Thelema. He says he's the devil. He confirms that. But he talks about the ultimate operation, okay? He's talking about a ritual here. And he says that, let me find the right spot here for you. He says, for the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. For evocations, it would be more convenient to place the blood of the victim in the triangle, the idea being that the spirit might obtain from the blood this subtle but physical substance which was the quintessence of its life in such a manner as to enable it to take on a visible and tangible shape. And it goes on and on. But yeah, these we're finding this, the occult agenda and a lot of these sort of ritual magic, witchcraft, all that stuff kind of came into popularity in the last 10, 15, 20 years it's been accelerating this, and that's something I've been covering for years on IlluminatiWatcher.com through different posts, and I didn't know where they were going with it. You know, they always talk about, all these occultists like Parsons and Crowley talk about how their plan is to destroy religion, specifically Christianity. And I didn't really understand where it was going. I thought, oh, they're just trying to, you know, sort of dilute Christianity out of existence, and that's where this is going. But I think it's more insidious than that. I think they're trying to instill this new worldview where there are aliens, and these aliens are the gods, and they created us, and the gods demand a sacrifice, and we need to conduct magic rituals, and this includes, you know, blood of children, to appease these gods, which is something we've done for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's only relatively recently that we stopped sacrificing people to these gods. They're just going to shift it over to, well, these gods are back and they're aliens, and you know, we need to, you know, there's always this talk of going back to the cosmos. We got to go back to the cosmos, and I don't know that we're physically going to do that. I think that it's kind of like these ancient cultures. They talked about how the Aztecs and such, they thought that when they would dismember a sacrifice, that the blood was the energy of the blood had the solar powers in it, had the energy of the sun in it. So when they cut off people's limbs and heads and ripped their hearts out, they had to do it really violently and do it in a really gory fashion, so that the energy from that blood could reach back to the god from which they were trying to send this, you know, sacrifice to. They were literally trying to go back home to the stars, to the cosmos, where these alien gods live. And I would argue that is the end game. They want to reinstill this really psychotic way of thinking.
Yeah. Boy, I have no idea how the general public is going to cope should there be widespread disclosure of what's been going on all this time. I mean, you know, the vast majority of people still believe that the government cares about them and is there to keep them safe and all of this, and the world is basically okay. We've just got to get rid of this deadly virus and then we can all go back to normal. People are going to lose their minds when this stuff gets revealed, when, you know, those that have never taken their first baby steps into this kind of research. It's mind-blowing to think what the reaction is going to be.
Yeah, it's going to be it's going to be something else, I'll tell you that. And that's where I'm torn with my, you know, I've been wanting to write a book on aliens for at least 5 years. I've been really like thinking about it and trying to figure out how I want to do it. And what's concerning to me is I think these ideas of adrenochrome are applicable to the alien agenda and the revelation that they're going to drop on us about all this crap, and which, you know, they're not going to lay it all out right away. They're going to ease us into this thing. But I don't know how much of it I want to put in the book, because censorship's very real. That's something that's, you know, clearly they blocked my my vaccine book.
Well, just don't mention the vaccines, and you should be good. You can mention blood drinking and eating of human flesh and all of that. That's all good. Just don't mention the vaccines.
Yeah, they're safe and effective. As long as they say they're safe and effective, they'll let it fly. But yeah, I think there's a connection to be had there, and I'm kind of torn as to how explicit do I make this connection in the book, so that I don't get completely kicked off of everything and, you know, pushed out of existence.
Speaking of books, did you see the one that was put out by P. Diddy, Sean Puffy Combs, called The Adrenochrome Witch?
I did. You know, I looked into that, and I believe it's a hoax.
I thought it was, because it was retailing for $100, which seems pretty hefty for a book.
Yeah, and I did some research. I don't have it handy, but there was a person that wrote this person wrote a few books like this, where they put like a big name, claiming a big name wrote it. And as far as I could tell, not that many people bought it. In fact, I downloaded right when it first kicked off, someone sent that to me, and I thought, no way. And I snooped around and found a preview of it on, I think it was Barnes & Noble, before they completely took it down. And you could tell from the writing, like, this was just somebody trying to, like, you know, capitalize on sensationalism of it.
Interesting timing that it would come out when it did.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think this is on the subconscious of a lot of people, and it's just a matter if people want to take a look at it or not. I think this is a real thing, this adrenochrome. I've got, in fact, I was preparing to do a giant show on adrenochrome. I've been casually sort of taking notes. That's why I do want to see that video you're talking about, because there's a few. I thought I had most of the references sort of nailed down.
Sure, I'll send you the link.
Yeah. Because it's hours long of a discussion about this stuff, because you really have to understand the history of blood sacrifice and combine it in with this attitude of the occult and making contact with alien gods, in the pursuit of immortality. It's like what all these things collide.
That's right. You've also got Google with their search engine Chrome, one of the best known browsers, I should say, best known internet browsers. And a few years ago, they put out a piece of software which went by the name Adreno. So you've got Adreno and Chrome both coming out of Google. What are the chances that that's just some random accidental thing?
Yeah, and Google's always been on my mind of their because they're the, they've become the filters of reality. I don't know one person who uses another search engine. I started using DuckDuckGo. I don't know if that's a whole lot better, but it's funny to me because I started blogging in 2011. I started doing YouTube videos in 2013. And then by 2016, they flipped things on me, and everything was increasing as it, linearly, as far as traffic and video views and everything. Everything was doing really well. And then in 2016, everything changed. And they first banned me from YouTube. Then they shadow banned my website, meaning that if you search, it used to be you would search for terms like Katy Perry Illuminati, and my website would be the first one. And that was for interchangeably almost anything. Anything that was celebrity name Illuminati or celebrity name occult or something like that. And now I'm not even on the fifth page. I've got people that steal my content that show up on the first page before me. And it's funny to me because I check because I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out, right? I'm trying to figure out is it my search engine optimization? Is it something wrong with my WordPress, that I got to update? I paid at least $1,000 for people to look at this thing to try to figure it out. And the last guy I had look at it said, no, there's nothing wrong with your thing. It's because Google changed their algorithm to push you to the back page.
Right.
And to confirm that, I went to Bing.com, DuckDuckGo.com, and there was another search engine, and searched the same terms across those as I did Google. And, I show up number one on all those other search engines, but with Google, I don't exist. And that's enough to really crush the website. I mean, it effectively got rid of me and my online presence there. So now I've been trying to build up through the podcast, trying to build through social media, and the social media game gets played. I just got to mind my P's and Q's of what I say until I say the wrong thing, and then it's kick me off of there too. So yeah. Anyway, Google, yes. So Google, they've got all these strange things of their little secret Google X program, and they're part of the whole digital transhuman agenda of conscious uploads, and they play a real role in this agenda. So of course they're in on it, and the fact that they've got the Adreno program on the Chrome browser or whatever, it doesn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah, exactly. It's so transparent when you know what you're looking for. It's so bloody obvious. You mentioned you'd done a show on the Wayfair conspiracy, and maybe that includes Walmart as well, because Walmart have been pulled into that whole conversation. I've not heard that episode, so what was the gist of what you were putting across there?
I basically did a deep dive into this Wayfair conspiracy, which, I'll give it the very brief primer. I'm sure most of the audience already knows, but they're selling these cabinets that are, someone on Reddit made the comment, started a post on it and said, hey, there's these cabinets that are $10,000 and they have the names of missing kids. And basically that's what kickstarted everything. And you can find similar sort of overpriced items with weird names that happen to pertain to missing kids on Walmart and even Amazon. I've seen people send me some Amazon screenshots, and and to play it on the rational side of the fence, there's 800,000 kids go missing in America every year. That's a lot of damn kids. So surely some of those names, even though they're unique and sort of strange, maybe sometimes, it's possible that they do sort of come across on these names of these furnitures. But it is a lot of strange things to consider with Wayfair. For instance, let me try to find my notes here. The first thing they said was, "Oh, that's not true. These are high quality cabinets. That's why they're $10,000." Then, because I follow this as it happened in real time, then they took it down, and you couldn't go to that web page for that product anymore because they were like, "Well, we have to take another look at it now." Then they went back up, and then they were only like $400.
Right.
But meanwhile, the mainstream media, the Newsweek, the Snopes, and all this stuff, they just immediately downplay it, like, no, this is all just fake stuff. And now they're trying to say there's another satanic panic going on, and that truthers are trying to, make something where there's nothing. Now, and I kind of go back and forth on this whole thing, but like, for one, I think, well, why would these elites that are plugged into this sort of weird stuff, like, why would they want to go on Wayfair and punch in they're going to punch in their credit card and their address or where to send the abducted child? Like, that's stupid. They would do it on the deep web, or whatever. They would do it in their sort of back alley deals. So, like, there's some ideas that I could stand behind as to why this isn't a thing. But there's all kinds of strange things, like how the detention centers down in the Mexican border, there was a lot of furniture going down that way, to the point that Wayfair employees had staged a walkout and protested it. And this is, before all this conspiracy abduction stuff, because there's all these sort of like kids that go missing down there is the argument. And the list goes on and on. I mean, it's at least an hour-long show.
So you're kind of on the fence with it then. It might not be a thing, or it might be.
Yes, I'm a little on the fence with it. Overall, the idea of could they be doing this stuff to kids for adrenochrome, I get behind that a little bit more. But is Wayfair involved? I don't. If they are doing this stuff through the Wayfair website, I would argue that Wayfair doesn't probably know about it. I think they're a third-party drop shipping kind of company, but maybe. I mean, who knows? There's definitely symbolism, and that was kind of where I took my analysis, because that's where I always like to take it, is through the symbolism in the movies and stuff. There's enough symbolism in these movies where they're referencing the furniture, like you talked about earlier with Lolita and all that stuff, and It seems like there's something to it. I don't know if it's exactly what the truther community has officially sort of like laid down as the narrative of the whole conspiracy theory, but I think there's something to it. So it could be true, is what I would say on it.
Yeah. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job on this show by way of a primer for should this type of information break the surface and become knowledgeable to the general public. I mean, everything I've seen suggests to me that the adrenochrome industry is a real thing. It is going on. It's absolutely horrific. It's devastating. But, like I say, if it's happening, then the least we can do is talk about it. And if it is real and valid, then we've got to bring the whole thing to a close as quickly as we possibly can to end the suffering of these kids, if this is what's really happening. So I hope that we've provoked a few thoughts with this show. You've certainly raised some interesting points, so I guess we'll just wrap it up there. In terms of content that you've put out on your IlluminatiWatcher.com, then, are there any recent articles you'd like to divert people to, or any upcoming ones you'd like to mention?
It's funny. Since Google Shadow banned me out of existence, there I've shifted over to podcasting. I don't really do articles like I used to. So I basically, people can check me out on my podcast, available on all the, Apple, iHeartRadio, Spotify, all the places. It's called Conspiracy Theories and Unpopular Culture. If podcasts aren't your thing, I've got a whole bunch of books on Amazon and Audible. I did a bunch of author-narrated books on Audible. I've got all kinds of topics. I mean, Alice in Wonderland, Rocky Horror Picture Show, the rap music industry that we talked about a while ago, Kubrick's Code, where I talk about some Stanley Kubrick's movies, all kinds of books on there. And like I said, I'm going to drop this Alien book sooner than later. I've got a sort of two-part, it's going to be 2 books kind of. I'm still trying to figure out how to make that work, but yeah, I'm going to drop an Alien book this year, and I'm trying to rush it because I think that Alien agenda is clearly cooking up, and that's the next big thing to hit us. So yeah, they can find me on the socials too if they're not trying to get that deep into anything. Instagram at Isaac Weishaupt is where I post a lot of intriguing photos and videos of stuff that I see happening in entertainment. So yeah, they can check me out on all those places.
Sure. You got a plane going over there?
Yeah, man, I think it's a drone, man. And the drones are trying to spy on me.
Keeping an eye on you. Yeah. All right, man. Well, thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate you being a part of the show, and we really shouldn't leave it so long next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's keep hooked up, man. Especially this year. This is a crazy year.
Anyone would think we had other stuff on our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, take it easy, brother. Catch you soon.
All right, Mike. Take it easy, man.
All right.
This is just for fun. I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up good vibrations. I'm picking up